Okay, folks, I'll get started. Hello, everyone. Great to be with you today. Welcome to this free webinar. Wow, Edify really are a benevolent bunch putting on a free webinar, right? It's very good of them to do that. I've actually joined a lot of these Edify webinars in the past myself, and it's very nice to be here actually presenting one. It's exciting. I'm actually joining you, believe it or not, from 20 miles north of Chicago. But as you can probably tell, I'm actually an exiled northerner in the US. We show up everywhere, don't we? Um, so this webinar today is going to be about the gap between buying AI tools and actually using them. And I want to be upfront with you about that. The gap is it's not really a technology problem. It's more a people and a culture problem. And I say problem, it can be a problem or an opportunity. And we're going to kind of delve into that through this talk. And it means, frankly, it lands squarely in the territory of HR professionals, which is exciting for us, right? So before we get fully going, I just want to get a feel for the group here in terms of people's kind of sentiments toward AI. So let's have a look here. In two words, here's an activity. In two words, AI makes me feel. And if people just want to type in, what I'll say here to start with is please do refrain from swearing. I've done this activity a few times. People get a bit excitable. I know you HR bunch are a lively bunch, but I'm just interested how people feel about AI. So if people just want to put that in the chat in a couple of words, that would be helpful. Excited and scared, yeah, at the same time. I think, Helen, that's certainly something a lot of us can relate to. And Sarah echoes that, anxious and excited. Empowered, that's a nice one. Sandeep, scared, sometimes confused. Anita, that's a really good one. Um, a lot of nervous and excited. This is great. This is really helpful because it just kind of helps me think how we can shape the talk today around AI adoption strategy. So appreciate your input there. And I think it's interesting because the way that the kind of comments are coming in there, there's almost a bit of a sort of dichotomy here when we talk about AI, right? Because some of you even used almost contradictory word, and I get that, right? So you've got two kind of sides of this. You've got the kind of scarcity aspect of AI, right? That's one side of things where you think AI could do something negative, right? Maybe AI is going to diminish, compromise, replace my job in some cases. These are real legitimate concerns and things that we should be wary of. But there's also the kind of abundance mindset on the other side of this visual with the kind of plush vegetation where we think AI can enhance my job, AI can amplify my job, AI is going to improve my job, right? So whichever way we think about that, AI is definitely going to impact our job in some way. And it's interesting to kind of think how those sort of contradictory ideas can exist together. All right. So I should probably introduce myself. My name's Joe Leslie. I've been in HR, but specifically L&D for over 2 decades now, and always in these kind of global roles, which is always interesting. I've worked in Asia, I've worked in the US, which is where I've been for the last 11 years or so, and really I got into the whole AI space, to use that term. In my previous role at Publicis Group, if you're not familiar with, I'm sure many of you, knowing your backgrounds, are familiar with Publicis Group, but they're one of the big traditional advertising holding companies, and they were actually one of the really early adopters of AI back in 2018. And I was running the training platform at the time, and it kind of fell on my shoulders, to use the term, to sort of be the AI guy and take this on. So I kind of fell into it in some respects. And I've taken that on in my current role at Golin, who are a PR and communications company. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Golin. And they've really, again, been very AI focused to become the world's first fully AI integrated agency. So I come at this topic with a position of longevity, if nothing else. It's kind of been 8 years that I've been specifically focused on AI in HR and L&D. Okay, so enough about me. I'm interested again in hearing from yourselves. I kind of want to use, I've constructed a very crude, unscientific scale here, folks. So bear with me here. I'm interested in what you think the impact of AI is going to be. And you can think about this from a societal perspective or in terms of your job role. It's kind of up to you how you interpret this. But I want you to think, how transformative do you think AI will be? And the scale I'm using here is one is minimal, right? So that's think of the metaverse or something, right? It's not really going to make a dent on our lives. Or I'm using the internet as a kind of a reference point. Five is historic, like the internet, right? So if you think it's going to be the same as the internet, put five. I've also put five plus beyond the internet. So if you want to put that in the chat, I'm just interested in what you guys, how you see this transformation. And wow, I'm seeing almost everyone is saying at least a five or a five plus. Richard, it says six. I like that, Richard. You're doing a different scale there. That's good. That's good. Um, wow, all of you are saying five. I didn't expect that. Usually when I ask this question, I get quite a variety, but it seems we've got a lot of AI believers in this group, which is great. And you know what? I think that you are correct, all of you, in saying at least a five. And this is echoed by the experts here. This is Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet, which is Google's parent company. I'm sure you're all familiar with this gentleman. And look at what he's saying here. This is such a grandiose statement. It seems almost comically overblown to hear things like this for the first time you kind of hear them, but all of what you're saying kind of backs it up, right? Which is that AI will have a more profound impact on humanity than fire, electricity, and the internet. And there's a kind of irony to who's saying this, right? This is the guy who runs Google. And to Google something has become a verb in the last sort of, what, 20, 25 years, right? We've been Googling things. If we look up information, we'll Google it, right? It's become the verb. But it's interesting and helpful here as we start this talk and start to think about how it's going to impact us in HR to kind of juxtapose Google with AI. Because what Google does is it retrieves indexed information. It's what's called a deterministic search, right? So if all of us on this webinar, if Richard or Stephanie or Anita or myself, if we Google something, you basically get the same response, right? And it's kind of gamed by search engine optimization to be the advertising, they're all ads, aren't they? The first few matches. But if you use AI, if you use an AI tool like Google Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever it may be, you get what's called a probabilistic response, which is that it weights its answer based on context. It's context laden. So Anita and Helena and Stephanie and Richard will get like different answers based on what it knows about us. So that's interesting to kind of think about that, right? In terms of what AI is actually doing, how it differs from the world that we've been inhabiting of Google. And I always use this slide. I think this is the best way to think about AI before we go into how it really impacts HR. I want to think about how it's impacting all of our jobs. And I think this is a really succinct way of framing this. So this is from a software engineer named Kent Beck. He posted this a couple of years ago now, and I really like this. So he's saying he's been reluctant to try ChatGPT. You can think of any AI tool here. And then he got over the reluctance and kind of understands it a little bit. And I kind of want to linger on this a little bit. He says the value of 90% of my skills just dropped to zero. So I kind of want to take a minute here. So think about what we all do, right, in the HR space. Think about all of us in our job roles. The value of our skills that we've spent our careers and our education cultivating these skills. I hate to think how long I've spent learning things like VLOOKUPs and pivot tables and things like that. And you just don't need them now, right? You just use AI to figure it out. And it's dropped so that those skills have dropped to zero. So it sounds bad, right? It sounds pretty desperate. But there's an upside. The leverage of the remaining 10% went up 1,000-fold. I need to recalibrate. And I love that word here, recalibrate. I've started using this word a lot, sort of subconsciously, because that's what's happening with AI. It's recalibrating our skills. And I want you guys to think about this in your own professions, but also how it affects our people, right, in our organizations, that 90% of their skills may have diminished, but the 10% that remain have become more important than ever. And that's kind of the human side. And this is built into this talk a lot today. The human side of AI is how we leverage that 10%. So I want to open up with that kind of framing. And specifically with HR, okay, let's take this in more HR specific. There's a gentleman named Brandon Carson, who some of you may have heard of. He was the Chief Learning Officer for Delta Airlines and Starbucks. He's quite a well-known figure in learning and development. He came up with something called Carson's Law, which is basically that technology doesn't really change a company. It makes it more of what it is. So it's kind of amplifying and exaggerating an existing culture. If you have a culture of avoidance, technology and AI will accelerate that. If you offer psychological safety and promote curiosity, that'll also be accelerated. So how does this affect us in HR? What do? We have to think about which culture we're actually handing the accelerator to. So I want you to be a bit retrospective here and think about the culture at your organizations. What is it that we're exactly amplifying and accelerating? Okay, so a bit of a rhetorical question there to think about. Okay, so let's get into this from a strategic point of view. This is the problem we're here to sort of talk about and discuss today. So buying the tools is the easy part. Okay, I've just been at a learning conference last week rather, in Orlando, Florida. And I tell you what, if you want tools and vendors and people selling shiny new AI tools, there's no shortage of that. And you probably all in your job roles get kind of bombarded with the latest technology pertaining to HR, the newest HRIS, with AI enabled and AI advanced features. But tools exist already, right? We have tools. Most agencies already have licensed AI tools. I know access can be an issue. I'm not totally diminishing that. I've seen that. But it isn't the main issue, right? What we see is that according to information here from Forbes magazine, who did an article on this last year, weekly usage across creative agencies is still well below 50%. So people have access to the tools. The problem is adoption. All right. So what is the adoption challenge here? Well, often people try these tools and maybe they tried them a year ago when these tools weren't as advanced as they are now, and they get mediocre results, or they just don't feel that it really resonates with their job role. And you see that in the data. Got this, like 3/4 of companies are still struggling to unlock real value. The same report told us that. Okay. So this is where it's important for us. The same gentleman I just mentioned, Brandon Carson, he did a talk last year. I attended it, and he spoke about, in his 30 plus years experience in HR, how HR's often struggled to get a seat at the table, to use that kind of cliche that we've often heard in terms of business decisions, strategic direction at companies. But with AI, we're kind of driving this, right? This comes from HR. HR's central to this. And the term that Brandon used, which I remember writing down, was that HR struggled to get a seat at the table historically, but now HR is the table. This is where these conversations are taking place. They're taking place in L&D, they're taking place in recruiting, they're taking place in upskilling, and all different mechanisms that HR owns. Okay, so this is a real opportunity. This isn't a technology issue, it's people and culture, and HR is squarely at the center of those discussions. So what kind of questions are HR dealing with? I'm sure many of you on the call can relate to some of these questions. When people feel their value is at risk, we talked about the 90% of skills diminishing, they kind of resist what these tools represent. Okay, so you might have people asking kind of existential questions, right? Will I still be valuable here? Can I learn this new stuff? I'm sure many of you have encountered resistance to AI from people who were perhaps scared a little bit. I mean, a few of you I appreciate the candid answers you give at the outset. A few people saying they're anxious about this for different reasons. So, there's some inertia in terms of people knowing what to do here. Is my job safe? All right, that's a huge one, isn't it? You also have the skeptics. This will pass. AI is just the latest fad. So there's a whole myriad different kind of questions that HR has to deal with, and when we're formulating our AI adoption strategy. Okay, and think about the context this lands in. Transformations have happened at companies many times, and AI is kind of landing within that context. So what I'm going to do now is a bit of practical work with you. Now, what you can do as well, if you're not able to do this now, you can go back. The recording will be available afterwards if you prefer to kind of do this as a little homework exercise. But if you're able to, and this is a really useful exercise. We actually did this with our exec team here at Golin as an exercise recently. And what it's going to consist of is if you happen to have your web browser open, if you want to navigate to LinkedIn, and I'm presuming many of you have LinkedIn profiles, been, HR professionals, probably most of you do. If you don't, you could use your CV or resume, to use the American term. But it's good to do this in LinkedIn because a lot of people don't actually develop their about profile in LinkedIn. They perhaps did it several years ago and haven't updated it. So a really good exercise that's a kind of tangible HR relevant use of AI that maybe I would like you guys to practice today, and perhaps it's something you can even share with your team or your exec team or colleagues, whomever they may be, is to do this. If you go to LinkedIn, if you navigate to your profile, if you click on the More option, what you can do is you can export your profile as a PDF. It downloads your whole profile with your employment history, your education history, all that good stuff. If you want to export that as a document and go to your AI tool, I don't know what you guys use. Obviously, we have a group here with different tools. I personally, we use Claude at Golin at the enterprise level. So Claude's my go-to. I use ChatGPT sometimes as well. But if you're using Google Gemini, if you're using Microsoft Copilot, it doesn't really matter. What you can do is go to the paperclip attachment icon, upload your LinkedIn PDF as a document. So you can do that now, or you can go back and do this later if you prefer. It's a really useful exercise. Like I say, we did this as an internal exercise at Golin. And I put a prompt here. Now, you can adapt this prompt, but this isn't the world's greatest prompt, but it'll give you something pretty good. Based on my LinkedIn profile, write me a compelling about section. And I've put a senior professional in a creative or PR agency because that's my particular domain. For those of you on the call, maybe you work in media agencies, maybe you work in a different area. So feel free to adapt that. You don't have to use it verbatim. It should feel human specific and genuinely reflect who I am. And what will happen there, if you spend a minute or so typing words to that effect in, and just again, feel free to adapt it to your own language. What will happen is it's going to generate, we talked about probabilistic responses from AI, right? How it takes context and generates an output based around context, different than Google used to do that. It'll take your career, your experience, your education, and it'll produce something specific to you. Now, listen, it might not be perfect the first time you do it, right? It might not give you the absolute, 100% complete sort of about section that you'd like. So you can iterate that. You can say, hey, can you make it a bit shorter? Can you lean more into my education stuff? Can you focus more on my current role, etc.? You can tweak it. And what it's going to do is it's going to generate something pretty good. And maybe do this as an exercise after the webinar if you prefer to spend more time on it. But we did this again with our whole exec team, and it generated really good outputs, and some of them way better than what people already had. And the reason this is a good exercise, maybe that this is something your L&D team could do as a training exercise, or maybe you can do it with your team, because when you make things relevant to the individual, they're way more invested, right? I always say the best engagement tool is relevance. The best way to get people engaged and adopting AI in our companies is to make activities like this that are relevant to people. They become the participants, right? So the shift from a spectator to a participant. And this exercise kind of hits on that. Okay, great. So if you've done that, great. If you saved it till later, no problem. But I recommend playing around with that. It's a good activity. And what it demo this is very meta, isn't it? What the demo demonstrated, it's kind of amplifying the work we've already done. You kind of change your role from a creator to an editor. And if you think about a newspaper, editor is like the highest position, right? To be an editor is an important position. And that's kind of what AI does. We don't have to be the ones that start this stuff out, but we edit it and we curate it and we kind of judge it. Okay, so let's adapt that exercise. So for HR leaders, that's most, if not all of you on the call today. I know this is your wheelhouse, as they say. You can take a thing that may be a typical kind of responsibility or project that you're involved in, something like drafting an AI rollout comms plan. Maybe that falls within your purview here. Now, instead of starting that from scratch with AI, what you can do is you can provide the context. You can be, I really love this term about what HR can do with AI, which is a context curator. And basically, what that means is you're creating the environment for people to be psychologically safe using these tools in the right way. So, upload your organization chart, you can go into your HRIS system, download it as a PDF or as a CSV file, put that into the AI tool, and have it kind of figure out job families, responsibilities. You can put in, all manner of different HR documentation that'll help inform what an AI rollout comms plan would look like, policies, AI drafts, the tools that you're using, and so on. You still know your people. So there's a human skill. Remember, we talked about the 90% skills that we don't maybe need, but the 10% we do. Well, the 10% here is you know your people. You have that knowledge that you can refine this document with. People managers. What about the review process, folks? All right. We all are involved in a review process every year, every 6 months, whatever it is. What AI can do is it can really help with the review process. Maybe this is for you and your team as a HR leader. Maybe this is something across your organization where the review process isn't perfect and there's ways you can enhance it. You can use AI because what you can do is take the AI tool, feed in context. That could be transcribed notes from one-on-one meetings. It can be information about goals, KPIs throughout the year, other forms of feedback from other peers across the organization. And those can kind of feed into review and make the review process way more high quality because there's more context and information and specificity to that process, right? So the human skill there is obviously still understanding what good looks like and knowing the people that we're managing, but AI can really help enhance that process as well. The last one here I want to really kind of drill into from a HR point of view, recruitment, right? Talent acquisition. I'm sure many of you on this webinar are involved in this process. I'm sure so many of you have written job descriptions, right, from scratch, or you've used a template. Maybe the template's way out of date. Maybe it needs modernizing. So one of the things we did at Golin is we updated all of our job descriptions because we're using AI so much in our day to day. So what I did was kind of backwards engineered our HR system, pulled out all the job descriptions, looked at HRIS, cross-referenced it, drilled into the skill data, right? So you say, okay, a project manager needs this skill with AI, not now, not in 2026, but in 2028, 2029. What skills are they going to need? And you can sort of synthesize all of that and come up with way better job descriptions that are looking for recruiting people for the future, not just today. So there's still a human skill in that, of course. You still are making the judgment calls. You're still interviewing people, right? We're not outsourcing everything to AI, but AI is enhancing that process, just like the review process. Okay. So what I'm going to do for the kind of second part of this webinar is give you more sort of agency specific examples. So I'm going to use my time at Golin and also previously at Publicis Group. At Publicis Group, I was upskilling 115,000 people globally on AI training. And Publicis Group now are one of the leading AI users. They're recognized across the kind of industry as been an industry leader for AI. So I kind of want to think like a few ways that we can do that from the HR perspective, not just focusing on the training aspect, but also more pervasively across HR. So a little bit about Golin, just to give you a bit of context, what I'm going to talk about. We have about 1,700 employees globally, give or take, 50 plus offices. We're winning awards. We're frequent winners of the Agency of the Year, recurrent winners of that, and the world's first fully AI integrated agency. Fun fact, Ted Lasso. I bet many of you have watched this, right? Ted Lasso. This tends to get people more excited than anything else about Golin. Golin created the character of Ted Lasso, believe it or not. I think that was in 2012 or 2013 when it was a promotional campaign for NBC. So that's a pretty cool thing to have been involved in, creating Ted Lasso. As a Brit living in the US, I'm all over that. The origin story is quite interesting. The gentleman here who I used AI to modernize a little bit is a gentleman called Al Golin. He, in 1957, so the legend goes, made a cold call to a guy called Ray Kroc, who some of you name may be familiar. He was the founder. There's actually a movie called The Founder about him. He's the founder of McDonald's. And Ray Kroc and Al Golin were basically besties for like 5 decades. They worked together. And Golin kind of created the McDonald's brand, and now Golin has a whole bunch of other brands, Walmart, PepsiCo, and so on, really big brands since then. So quite an interesting backstory. Now, how are we using AI? Well, in a few ways, and I'm going to just kind of go up for these pretty quickly, but as a PR and comms organization, crisis management is a huge part of what we do here. So mitigating kind of reputational risk online, monitoring sentiment, and kind of preemptively figuring out crises before they happen using data dynamically online is a big part of how we use AI. Social media. Now everyone knows that social media is a lovely, happy place, isn't it? Where no one ever says anything mean about anyone, and it's a very utopian environment, of course, but actually not really. So social media, like managing companies' social media accounts and focusing on kind of creative direction through social media is another one. Creative. So you all know about this. Famously, AI is heavily embedded in the creative process now, be that through ideation or creating images and videos and so on. The volume of ideas that AI can come up with is incredible, right? It might be that you give it 100, tell it to come up with 100 ideas for a campaign. Even if 99 of them are terrible, there's chance one of them is going to be really good, right? So it can just amplify the scale of creative content. Similarly with research and insight, again, the kind of analytical capacity of AI is way in advance of what just humans can do. So a lot of this, I just want to say, it's not just that AI is doing these things. AI is augmenting what humans can do. So there's a term we use at Golin is instead of AI, we kind of invert it and talk about intelligence augmentation. So like we started this talk with, that 10% of the human skill that we still really need is layered with the technology, and it's a perfect kind of combination, right? All right. So I want to talk to you guys in a bit more detail about our strategy. And I really hope in the sort of last sort of 15 minutes or so of this talk, I want to give you some really tangible ideas for things that you can take away and apply potentially to your own organizations, or at least think about applying. Okay. So one of the first things I did when I took my job at Golin a couple of years ago was I realized we didn't have any data really around AI usage. Um, One of the reasons for that, I don't know if many of you in this chat use in this talk use Microsoft Copilot. Maybe this has changed since, but the way that Microsoft Copilot, which was our enterprise tool, main enterprise tool a couple of years ago, Microsoft would only give usage data to like two people at the organization. And our organization was, we had a holding company, which was IPG. Now it's Omnicom. I'm sure many of you know about Omnicom and IPG, what's happened there. But um, so basically, long story short, we couldn't really get much data because they'd only send it to like the CEO of IPG, and he's probably got busier things, more important things to do than just send us usage data of how people are using Copilot. So we couldn't really get our hands on very good data points. So what did we do? And I suggest you do this. We ask people, right? So what we've been doing every 6 months, we're due for our fourth of these in a few months, is use organization-wide surveys. All right. So we constructed a survey which had several questions pertaining to how people are using AI and also kind of sentiment analysis, kind of like I asked you at the start of this talk. What do you think about AI? Like what are your feelings? What are your sentiments? And what you can do if you ask your people and you do a survey and you promote that survey and you have very visible, important people telling people to do that survey, is you can get a lot of information around organizational attitudes and usage of AI. And you can then use your HR system and kind of marry those documents and look at if you have access to usage data, all of that, and figure out the best way to upskill and train people and build a strategy around AI. So one of the things we did, I'll talk about this in a second, is we built very role-based specific trainings, not generic AI training that everyone takes. You know, I already mentioned the best engagement tool is relevance. So why would we show a creative professional an AI training that's designed for a strategist or a data engineer? It should be relevant for your job role. So we created all these different pathways, which I'll walk you guys through. It's something you can also do. Another thing I just want to touch on here, shadow AI. So all of you are going to face this challenge, and it's something that can fall into the HR domain as a kind of responsibility here is how to mitigate what's called shadow AI use. Shadow AI, if you've ever heard that term, basically means people are using AI tools, but not the right ones. They're using public tools, not the ones through SSO and that are guarded through the firewall and protecting your intellectual property, right? Your information about your company. So you don't want people to be going into their personal ChatGPT account and telling it about the stuff you're working on at your company, because that can potentially train the public model and leak information. So you need clear guardrails and guidelines around AI usage. And that's something that HR can lead from the front. Only use AI tools that are approved by your organization. Go through SSO. Don't use your own personal account. Okay, that's a very real lesson that you can teach. Okay, I'm just going to go into a little detail here about how we've done this at Golin. We have a learning management system, right? I'm sure many of you in your HR roles know you probably have a HRIS system that has a LMS attached to it. Maybe it's Workday, maybe it's Cornerstone, whatever that may be. Think about how to create these role-specific pathways, folks. So for us, what we did, we figured out 9 job families from HRIS, and then we constructed an AI maturity kind of scale, if you will, of basically foundation, intermediate, advanced. With that, you can then have specific pathways for example, project managers at those 3 different levels. So we have 27 different pathways, right? We have 3 versions of the 9 job family training. It resonates way more with people when you personalize this training, and an LMS can do that. Almost all LMSs are capable of doing that. We also have a peer mentorship program. This is something HR can own, HR can promote, HR can manage. We pair up mentors and mentees across different geographies, and basically using more advanced users to sort of teach and mentor those who are just new to using AI. And also having a bit of cross-pollination here, right? So pairing creative people up with data people and learning from each other's experiences, even if they're in different job roles. So kind of cross-pollinating ideas across the organization. Again, something that HR can do. I already talked about the review process. So one of the really effective ways, a bit like we did with our LinkedIn exercise, right, where we went in and updated our LinkedIn profile, one of the really effective ways you can have people using AI is by embedding AI in an existing process. Okay. I don't know if any of you have ever read the Atomic Habits book by James Clear. It's something interesting that I think we can think about is it's easier to modify an existing habit than to create a new one. So people habitually use the review process. Everyone has a review, right? So build AI into the review process. Have a question where the participants need to use AI. Maybe they use the AI tool to build out their free top goals for next year using AI, right? It's a really good way of just getting people used to it. Okay, so these are some ideas that you can use in your role as HR leaders in your organization. And I kind of want to just underscore this. So there are these structural challenges, right? There's a gentleman called Thomas Gilbert who came up with this term. You've probably heard it because many of you, maybe learning and development people as well as HR people, performance engineering. And it's basically the idea that it isn't a skill gap or a tool gap that is the challenge for us. It's creating the system, the environment, and the conditions. So if someone in your agency isn't using AI, here are some things that we can kind of ask. Do you allow protected time for experimentation, or is every hour billable? All right. So have a think about that. Do people have time to actually do this? Are you creating AI as a strategic priority in your workplace, or is it a nice to have? So think about that. Managers have a responsibility to promote using AI tools, and managers signal into their employees that AI is really important. Are they using it day to day with their teams? Accessibility. We talked about this at the start, but like, do people know how to access Microsoft Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever you use? Or is there some complicated labyrinthine IT system that's kind of a barrier to that? Have a think about that as well. And just this culture of psychological safety that I'm going to drill into a little bit more in a minute. Are people afraid of using these tools? Some of you mentioned anxious at the start. So think about that. Okay, and I want you to be a bit retrospective, folks. So I'm going to ask you to just get involved in the chat here. I want you to think about your own company. And this can be more than one answer, by the way. There can be a combination here of answers. But which of these is most absent in your organization right now? And I'm going to give you some options, folks. All right. Again, you can use permutations here and combinations as you see fit. Do you have protected time to experiment? Is leadership visibly using AI? Is it modeling that behavior? Is the behavior change being modeled by senior personnel at your company? Do you have role-specific relevant training, like I mentioned, or is it generic training? Everyone watches the same LinkedIn learning course or whatever it may be, Udemy course, or do you have personalized training? And finally, psychological safety. Do you feel that your organization provides permission to try and fail? I just want to see what is the biggest barrier here, folks. Or okay, thank you. I see Sandeep, Stephanie, thanks for your answers. Both of you said C, which is interesting. B, leadership. Okay, great. Thanks, Vinay. Sarah is also saying A. A and C. Okay, interesting. So C seems to be a recurring one. And guys, I'm not surprised because as an L&D person myself, that is probably the biggest that I've seen is the lack of personalization in training is a big challenge. So I'm not surprised. Helen, thank you for your comment here. We're only piloted Copilot. It's not been used at the moment. See, it's sort of access. People don't know how to get there, and they haven't basically been given the training or perhaps the visibility there. So yeah, all of these, right? All of the above, Helen. Okay, so I want you to think about this, and then after this webinar, maybe have a think about some of these suggestions I'm going to offer you as mitigating uh, policies here. What are four things that you can do as HR professionals starting this week? Okay. And this is, I know that this doesn't fall squarely in your domain only, by the way, guys. I'm not deluded. I've been in HR for 20 plus years. I know that this requires partnership with leadership, with visible people in the exec team, but creating safe spaces where there's no wrong answers. An AI office hour, a bit like this webinar where we can chat and people can ask questions. You can share ideas, a safe space where we can figure this out. I've put a team WhatsApp there because I use WhatsApp all the time. Probably not the best mechanism work-wise. Maybe Microsoft Teams is better. People share what worked and what didn't. That's an idea that you can apply. Leaders learn in public. So when we did that LinkedIn experiment a few minutes ago, 10, 15 minutes ago, maybe your chief financial officer can do that as well in a session, in a training session, and people take that as a learning. I really like this one. Give explicit permission to invest time. So what I did at Publicis is I would always, with my team, give them on a Friday an hour and a half. I said, book your calendar. Don't just take an hour and a half. Book it that you're busy for an hour and a half and spend that hour and a half doing stuff with AI, figuring things out, experimenting, build a GPT, build a project, ask it a question, do whatever you want to do in AI, even if it's not strictly a work project, just things that open ideas up. Can you do that, folks? Is there a way you can build out an AI week maybe into a year that where people could do this? Another thing, maybe the strategy isn't perfect. Helen's answer in the chat shows us that that isn't always the case. But as long as you have a policy and guardrails and you know which tools to use, start experimenting. Okay. Maybe that the training isn't perfect now, but just create this organically where people experiment. Okay. Now, I just want to talk about resistance. This helps us from a HR perspective identify adoption strategy, right? What people are not doing, right? And you'll have to forgive the American spelling here, folks. I didn't realize skeptic is spelt with a K in the US. You learn something every day, right? They like to spell words incorrectly on occasion. What can I say? So you have some skeptics, folks. You're going to get this at your organization. It's just the rules of demographics. You're always going to get skeptics, and that's okay because skeptics, they're not enemies. Think of them as quality control. If you encounter skepticism of AI, you can build these people into your strategy. You can invite them to talk about this is what we do at Golin. When we do our survey, we have a bunch of people saying, hey, I hate AI. I don't like it. I don't like what it's doing to society. I don't like what it's doing to the creative, industry and so on. And we don't treat that as being negative, really. What we see is that someone from a different perspective, how can we work with them? How can we make their expertise the filter, not the friction? So your skeptics are people you can work with. So maybe reframe what a skeptic is. Anxious. Some of you use this word. I saw in the chat when we started out here, some of you used the word anxious. All right. So that's completely natural, right? To be worried about job security. We see this in the news, don't we? AI is taking jobs. It's creating all these changes in the workforce. So what can we do with the anxious folks? Small, safe wins, right? Start with low stakes, personally relevant tasks. Again, the LinkedIn example, relevant to them, right? Get them doing things like this, training around these low stakes, personally relevant tasks. Maybe have a mentorship program that peers with a champion. I mentioned that as something that we did. So there are ways that we can lean into those different behaviors. Now, I kind of want to spend the last couple of minutes here. I'm going to do a Q&A for the last sort of 10 minutes or more. But I just want to show you what happened at Golin from using these approaches, just so this doesn't seem too theoretical, right? I kind of want to show you where we landed. And I want to do this in three different tiers. Some of you may be familiar with something called the Kirkpatrick model, which basically I like it a lot because it says, hey, we shouldn't measure learning in L&D. We should measure behavior change and results as different level. That's what we really want, right? We don't care about educating people. We care about them changing their behavior and getting results. And that's why, and HR obviously creates those conditions. So I just want to walk you through these. In terms of learning, which is the lower level of these three, we've seen an almost 50% reduction in knowledge barriers. That was our number one challenge when we did our first survey. People were like, I don't know about this technology. What do I do? I don't get it. I'm confused. And we've seen that reduced by almost 50%. We've also seen a 41% in, I mentioned that we've got this maturity scale, people jumping a level in their AI maturity. 41% jumped at least one. We have many who jumped multiple maturity levels. In terms of behavior change, we see this, right? I can go into Claude. I see we've got double the users that we had a year ago. So AI tool usage has doubled. And as evolution in terms of sophistication, how do we use AI has changed to how do we optimize AI? Okay, so those are two very different questions. And in terms of results, this is the one I really want to focus on. Did it move the business? As HR professionals, this is one of the things that we're most interested in, right? Ultimately, we're part of a business that wants results, whatever our particular domain is, that's what we're after. We see a 25% jump in client work using AI. So that's a tangible empirical result that we can measure. And we do something called CSAT, which is customer satisfaction scores in our agency. I'm sure many of you are at agencies, you know all about those. We're getting feedback from our clients. We've seen quality gains double in terms of the feedback that we're getting. Okay, so these are real results, not just kind of hypothetical ways that AI has helped our business transformation in recent times. Okay, I want to kind of close out with kind of want to come back full circle because we started off by talking about skills. Okay, we started talking about how some skills are going to be replaced by AI, but some are going to be more important than they ever were. I want you to think about this. This is a future of jobs report from last year from the World Economic Forum. You see the numbering here, folks. Maybe in the chat, I want you to think about this. Be a bit retrospective again here. Which of these do you think are our domain as HR people? Which of these skills kind of feed into the HR space? Now, obviously, look, some of these are technical skills. I'm not going to lie. Network and cybersecurity, technical. I get it. Number one, AI and big data. Again, that's more of a technical thing. But a lot of these are environmental and cognitive skills. All right. So if you want to use the chat, put in the numbers that you think are relevant to HR. I want to see what you guys think here because Helen, thank you. Multiple of these are relevant. Now you could sort of argue you might see it a little differently. Stephanie, thank you. All but number two. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Talent management, number eight. I mean, obviously that's a HR specific thing. Leadership and social influence, 100%. Creating an environment of curiosity and lifelong learning. That's basically what this webinar has been about, right? Creating that environment, resilience, flexibility. So these are human skills, folks. So this is when we talk about in the title of today's webinar about the human aspect. This is what I really want you to take away from this talk today is that AI, it's not going to change us all into neural network experts who know all about everything to do with technology. No, it's not. It's kind of the recalibration of our human skills. So I think that's the interesting insight. And the last slide from me, three things you can do, guys. I'm going to give you a bit of a call to action as my last slide here. Think about this. You can go back and you can rewatch this recording if you want to kind of spend a bit of time thinking about these. This will be available for you. Audit the conditions, not the content. Okay, this is the environment around you. That's what we've been talking about today. Okay, so permission to fail, , psychological safety, those kind of tools. Think about those. Making it personally relevant. We talked a lot about the training side, how we can make that personally relevant to individuals. We talked about the LinkedIn exercise. Okay. I really like this. Mandates create compliance, relevance creates habits. Let's make these AI upskilling relevant. Let's create an environment from HR throughout the organization where this is the case. And the last one, I really think that giving senior leadership visibility from a top-down kind of perspective, really get it creates buy-in, it creates momentum, it creates credibility for what we're doing on in the HR space in terms of trying to create the conditions for the AI adoption, right? Which is the kind of thing that we're talking about today. So when people see leadership learning in public, it shifts a psychological safety to the whole organization. So I kind of want to end on that really. Let's kind of create these environmental conditions that allow AI usage. So I'm going to close out here. Thank you for your time and your attention and your participation here. I do want a Q&A. We've got about 8 minutes. I'll pass over to Anita in a few minutes just to run through some kind of Edify specific remarks. But I just want to open this up, guys. I know I don't think there's a audio component here to questions, but if you do have any questions, do feel free to make use of the chat. I'd be more than happy to answer those. So do feel free rather to type away. While you're potentially doing that, I just want to address, excuse me, a comment from Helen in the chat here who mentioned we've only just piloted Copilot, so it's not been used at the moment. So I would say there, Helen, about and if any of you other than Helen are in this situation where you're just piloting an AI tool, how should you do that? I would say for that pilot, definitely involve senior leadership to promote the usage of Copilot. I just think that's the easiest, quickest way, most effective way as well to get buy-in. So I would suggest if you have a session, maybe if you guys have an L&D team that does regular trainings, maybe you could partner with the L&D team and say, hey, in the next training, why don't we have a senior leader demonstrate the use of Copilot using their LinkedIn profile, a bit like we did today? And the reason that's a good example is because everyone uses LinkedIn pretty much, and it's very relevant to all of us, like that, like we already discussed. So I think that's a nice, quick way that you can do that. Um, I'm just being mindful of time. We only have a few minutes, and I want to give my friend Anita enough time to speak as well. So what I'll say in kind of closing out here, if you do have any questions or any feedback or anything you really want to know about, my let me just put it here, my LinkedIn profile. We just talked about LinkedIn, didn't we? Is on this QR code. You're welcome to message me on LinkedIn. I do my best to respond to messages, and I'd love to engage in any chat that you know any questions you may have. So you're welcome to do that. I encourage it. Anita, I'll pass over to you for closing.
Great. Thanks, Joe. That was a really great session. Thanks so much. I imagine everyone's got lots of really useful takeaways from that. I just wanted to jump on really quickly. I'm Anita. I'm the marketing manager here at Edify. And for those of you who don't know us, we are a UK-based AI skills training company. Um, Joe, if you wouldn't mind going along to the next slide for me, please.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot I'm
That's okay.
controlling the
Thank.
slide. Yes.
Oh, the next one after that. Thank you. We do have a new guide out. It is a guide on building sustainable AI adoption in creative and media agencies. It is a practical guide, lots of ways for HR leaders to drive adoption. If you want a copy, then you can just scan the QR code there and fill in the form, and we'll email it over to you. Or I have popped a link in the chat as well, so you can just click on the link there. Joe, would you mind also just then go to the next one? Thank you. Just one last thing before we go. We specialize in training creative and media agencies to use AI confidently. So if you need to build the practical AI skills, behaviors, and workflows needed to adopt AI day to day, then we would love to talk to you. If you think that would be useful, you can scan this QR code and fill in your details, and someone can get back to you as soon as possible. Sorry, I realise I said that really super quickly, but I'm again conscious of time. Um, I think that's it for today, unless Joe, you have anything else to add?
No, no, I
No?
think we covered quite a lot of material, so I know it was probably a lot of information for people, but I know that Anita, the recording would be available. What I'd
Yep,
maybe suggest to people is maybe just go back, revisit some of those resources in terms of recommendations, strategies, things you can do. Um, because and if you do have any questions, like I say, I'm more than receptive to working with people. So just feel free to message me if you have any direct questions.
great. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, thank you so much for your insights today. They've been wonderful. And thank you, everybody else, for coming. We'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.